conference. I think it's in Liverpool, isn't it? Anyway, it's like that conference where it's part health system, part academic, and part kind of commercial partner stuff. And the commercial partners basically kind of subsidize a bunch of stuff for us, which is really good through sponsorships and things. So kind of a little bit like a medical conference, but possibly a little bit more commercial than a medical conference would be, but not a lot more. So no, it's good. It's good. We enjoy it. And I've been every year since I've worked here. So and it's, well, every year it's happened. It hasn't happened for the last 2 years. But yeah, well worth going to. What else would you say, Eileen, about HINZ, the conference?
Mute. I don't know. It's a good networking event. There's a nice mixture of researchers, industry, clinical people, IT folk that work in the system. Yeah, it's quite diverse people. It's full on. You are quite tired by the end of it. But yeah, just it's good to go along to presentations and just hear what people are up to as well. And make connections that way. Yeah, I would say the primary thing is the networking opportunities, just to find out what's going on across the sector and who's doing what where. Yeah, find collaborators, basically. Do you know what I mean? So it's a really good opportunity for that. And then also kind of suppliers in the market as well is quite a useful thing, because it is such a big conference. You generally get a bunch of people coming from Australia and sometimes further afield where they might not necessarily be present in country. So we have Cerner come over for it, for example, from Australia. CSIRO came over in 2020 when it was in 2019 when it was in Hamilton. So and they're quite interesting because we do a little bit with them in terms of they've got a server called Onto server, which is basically for different shortening of ontology. So they do code sets and things like that. So we talk to them about that, but then they do a bunch of other stuff as well. So as you probably know. Yeah. I saw in the program there was an Irish delegation. Was that right? Or is that kind of in planning? Quite possibly. I don't know. It was like a placeholder. I was just like, ooh, that'd be quite interesting. Yeah.
That's really good. It's kind of slightly different take on most of the conferences we go to are either research or kind of academic side. So talking more to industry, I think as we're growing our data science team and trying to push more into kind of that algorithms involved in medical devices and into wearables and stuff, I think we probably need to get out and do more networking anyway. So yeah, I guess it's a different feel to a conference to probably my closest to heart from kind of going to conferences in the UK was probably Public Health England's annual conference, and that was multi-day, all about public health, and really enjoyed that one because it kind of gave you a real buzz and enough work to do for the next 2-3 years. But yeah, kind of also a nice chance to nerd out with all people who've been using my reports for the previous years. So yeah, totally. I like conferences where I get to either present or at least talk to people about what we've been doing, and they actually recognise our outputs in terms of So definitely there'll be people there that will recognise and understand the type of work that you do. So put it that way. Some of them will be coming from a health perspective, and some of them will be coming from a technology or a data perspective. Does that make sense? So it's quite a bit of a meeting kind of. They call it HINZ as a bit of a meeting place in terms of coming together. The other conference that probably you would find useful in this country is the one that happens in July. So they have the Health Tech Week in July, and Diana Sue organises basically a medtech core kind of conference in the same building. So that happens in Auckland, and that's quite a medical devices, AI, machine learning focused conference, and it's quite academic. So lots of people presenting on papers and things like that. So that's normally a day or 2 days, I think. Like they kind of spills over a little bit depending on, and then there's a specific researchers day as well. So But I think you guys would probably fit into that. And so in the
and we're supposed to be part of the medtech core anyway, or whatever it became.
Yeah. So it's
we've
now
seen Diana on this call a few times too, so we should probably just touch base anyway.
Yeah, you definitely should. So they've got money through something called Te Toku Mata Order, and so they've got a 3-stage funding process for turning research into products. So they've got money that they can give away, and it's quite a useful program. Oh, Justin's involved with it, so he's putting his thumbs up. So am I. So I'm on the independent advisory panel, and they're getting some really interesting stuff coming through, and things that I think you guys probably could be contributing to as well. So be good for you to get in touch with her, Richard, I think, because you'll probably find there's a lot of stuff that you guys could give us lots of input to. So yeah, so that's that. What have I seen in the news? Oh, something I saw in the news this morning, posted it up on the forum, was I read it in The Guardian, but apparently they've used images of retinas to evaluate cardiovascular disease risk. So normally at the moment we're using it for diabetic retinopathy. So you look at the retina for potential blindness, but they're using the same image to look at cardiovascular disease risk. So I'm kind of like, wow, 2 diseases at once. So one image, which presumably we could standardize, simplify, and make more widely available. And you might be able to measure more than one thing out of that. So there's a product in New Zealand called Tuku Eyes, which is an algorithm for measuring diabetic retinopathy risk. And so it's pretty highly accurate. So greater than 99% sensitivity and specificity in low-grade diabetic retinopathy. So pretty good. And if you could couple that, one image to 2 algorithms, that feels really interesting. So yeah, I saw that this morning, and kind of makes me just think that we really are on this cusp of things coming out of research and into production, and that opportunity to kind of really change some of how we do healthcare. So I don't know if
is that something that kind of maybe how detailed do you need to go on the eye retina images? Is it something that 3-5 years down the line is going to be something you do on your iPhone, like
well, so
but Bina.ai you were using last year?
Yeah, so we're busy building out an actual feature for Bina right now. So we've got the SDK and we've got a license key and stuff, and so we've got some people actively building the feature out so we can put it into testing. It's my sense is, what I've been reading is that you might be able to get a 3D printed hood, Richard. And so if you have a phone, and obviously if you lined up some lenses on the back of the phone with an eyepiece, you could put it up to someone's eye and then take a photo. Presumably you'd need to dilate the pupil, I assume, in order to take a photo of the retina, because that might be difficult otherwise. But I assume there must be a light component to get a reflection off the retina rather than off the front of the eye, and then presumably you might want to dilate the pupil as well. When I'm guessing, so I don't know enough about the process to know if that's true or not. But I do know that.
Remember, the amount of hassle it was for me to make a 3D printed hood to sit an iPhone on top, just so you can sit the iPhone on top of a light box.
Yeah.
To look at glowing test tubes. So I kind of love the confidence in doing it for a kind of much more complicated faces on flat things. But I love where you go with this one.
Yeah, well, so I had a chat with Michael Sheedy about it, and they've been testing some of those things in Christchurch. So more around an otoscope, so looking at the back of someone's throat or in their ear. So possibly less complex lensing kind of system. And as long as it's the same phone all the time, I think that's the problem, Richard, is sometimes, you try and build something for lots of people's phones and then all the phones are different. And so if it was a tool for a clinician or something and we bought lots of the same thing, then maybe it's more more usable. So I don't know. Taranaki are actually testing a product from Taito Healthcare, which is like a blue. So this becomes a complexity of that sort of thing. You know, yeah, you could not use the phone and have a device that's connected to the phone, but then you have to manage the Bluetooth connection and the transfer of data, and if it's big images, that takes ages. You know, and then you have to pair it and unpair it, and you have to maintain the code for the Bluetooth for the connection, and all of these sorts of things add a whole lot more complexity. And you go, well, is it better to have a separate device that connects by Bluetooth, or is it better to like build an appendage to the device itself? It's kind of a really interesting kind of question about where the trade-off is. But we've been talking about this BNAR thing, and we were talking to Nelson Marlborough Ross. So yes, I can send it to you. It's on the forum. It's on the HINZ forum.
Okay.
It's on our emerging health tech thing on the HINZ forum. Where was I going with that? Oh, we were talking to Nelson Marlborough, and so apparently oral chemo is now a real thing, and so they're busy out giving oral chemo to everybody. But there's effects on blood pressure often with oral chemo, apparently, which I didn't realise. And they're sending district nurses out to take people's blood pressure once every week or two. And she's like, oh my God. Do you know what I mean? It's like, why? How do you think that's actually accurate or useful if you send a district nurse out to someone's house to take their blood pressure? You know, could we use that BNAR AI kind of model instead of having to do that? Then I was thinking, so you've got a video of their face and a photo of their eye, and it probably covers off lots and lots of aspects. And then the last thing that I know, add to this again, we were talking to Pfizer the other Friday, and they've got a COVID, so they obviously provide the antivirals in this country and largely around the world for COVID. And they're doing a prospective study at the moment on COVID management with their antivirals. And they're doing a screening test for people to be eligible by listening to their voice, because apparently they've got an algorithm that can detect chest infection in someone's voice. So you go, well, that's in a phone too. So let's just record some video. You have to say some words, and then we'll go and take a photo of your eye. And imagine all of the things you could like capture just in doing that. That feels to me pretty magical, you know. So just have to find places to store that data, manage it well. So that's what I saw on the news this morning, and it just sparked a whole lot of thoughts in my head about joining stuff up. So I don't know, Mary, if you've seen anything in the news in the last couple of weeks.
I found two local ones which are quite cool. So there's down in, it was a collaboration between Otago University of Auckland and AUT. Researchers have successfully developed and trialled a needle-free dental anaesthesia for teeth extractions, helping needle phobics to combat dental anxiety, which is very close to my heart. So I would be rather excited about something like this. So that's modeled off the needle-free jet injection, which creates a jet of fluid that can deliver drugs through the skin and tissue.
Oh yeah.
So it's a significant barrier. Said dental anxiety was a significant barrier, which could lead people to avoiding the dentist altogether. So yeah, I thought that was quite cool that they've started trialing down there. I think they trialed it like a very small trial. It was only 8 patients, but all of them preferred that over the injections, though 2 of the 8 did need additional traditional injections to keep going with whatever extraction they were getting done at the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, 6 out of 8 didn't, you know, so.
Yeah,
it feels like if it's not a hugely more expensive thing, you know, you can offer that and then top it up if you have to.
Yeah, for sure. So they're going to see if there's other dental procedures that can use this as well, other than just extractions.
Be interesting about that, because fascinating that they've kind of chosen a dental model, like, because obviously there's like skin lesion work that general practice does lots of. And so you kind of wonder, would that jet injection work for skin, you know, skin local anaesthetic type stuff?
Yeah.
Maybe the gum's easier to penetrate with the jet needle or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there was kind of a mention that I think the back of the mouth stuff is a bit more difficult due to, I guess, if you got your hard palate and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still promising. And the second one also coincidentally on the needle-free line. There's a Canterbury University mechanical engineering PhD student has won the best free paper award for the College of Intensive Care Medicine Aussie New Zealand annual scientific meeting, and hers was for a low cost light based glucose sensor. So it's a handheld light based blood glucose measuring technology for application in diabetic monitoring. And the picture of it just kind of looks like a wand with lights, but I guess there's more technology in there. So yeah, the device
it literally is magical. It's a wand.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it looks like it's like a one-time cost of approximately $500 versus the current price for the implanted glucose sensors. So
continuous monitoring stuff. So I think they normally run like $1,000 and then maybe $50 a week or $20 a week. Or
$2,500 to $5,000 a year.
Yeah, because then you have to replace the patch. You have the machine, but then you have the patches that you have to replace.
Yeah, I think my niece has one, and I think it's $100 a fortnight for just the patch replacement. So yeah, pricey but handy. So
very interesting. I don't know what are you working on, Ross? What are you doing at the moment? Have you got your presentation ready for HINZ so we can actually see what the computer systems are that we run in the health system?
That'd be silly.
Plenty of time. I love that. Got plenty of time to get my presentation ready. It's not happening for ages.
Yeah, I'm trying to work on the NHI-HPI capability utilization with Joel, kind of roadmap stuff, but it's kind of slow moving because there's a lot going on in that team with getting the services out to AWS and Fire. So what's next kind of planning is still slow moving, but trying to work on that, trying to get back to some of these infographics, but haven't done anything on them for a while, and mainly rheumatic fever register and cardiovascular risk, which is why I was interested about that price getting. It might be the future of replace the current algorithms that we have.
Yeah. So I was talking to long-term conditions people, and they were talking about whether we have a pre-CVDRA, CVDRA. So I was like, oh, okay, what do you mean? And they said, well, so you've got this problem at the moment where you go, you get called up by a GP, and then you go in and you fill out a survey, which you could have filled out at home, and maybe you would be more honest as well, because I ask you how much you drink and how much you smoke. And so you might be more honest if you're filling it out with a machine rather than with the nurse who's going to judge you. And then they give you a script, then they give you a request, an order form for going and getting bloods done. And I said, how many people don't go and get their bloods done? And they're like, oh, about 30% of people like go to the appointment with the GP or the practice nurse, fill out the survey, and then never get the bloods done. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you get the bloods done first? Like, so you get the bloods done and then you go and do the survey. Oh, I didn't really think of it like that. You're like, well, do you know what I mean? It's like, so you chase the people to get the bloods done so they can do the survey, not try and chase them afterwards. And then why wouldn't you just do the bloods at the surgery? Oh, well, they don't do pickup from our surgery or whatever. It's like, oh. So I think there's something to be changed in that. But they were like, maybe there's stuff that you could just be assessing, in the general public. If you eat lots of bad food and you drink lots of alcohol and you smoke, chances are you're going to have some cardiovascular disease. And, if you could easily measure someone's blood pressure or, with the photo of the back of the eye or whatever, like it changes quite a bit of the paradigm of having to go to see your GP to get that risk assessment done. The other thing that came up in the conversation was the planning, and about this, Ross, was the post-planning bit is not very good. So as in everyone goes and gets their, cardiovascular risk assessment and says you've got a 5% chance of dying in the next 5 years of cardiovascular disease. And then you've got this, so what do I do about it? And how do you kind of track someone's actual participation in the care that we expected them to have? And so apparently that's not very good either, or was highly variable, I think is kind of what they were saying. And you've started doing some work in this, Ross, to kind of for information to give to the patient, like here's what we think are the right things to give to the patient. but it feels like there's more stuff after that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, hey, we gave you that stuff once you had the risk assessment. It's now 6 weeks later. Are you doing what we said? Do you know what I mean? It's some of those kind of things.
Yeah, it's only a pretty small bit of the picture. Yeah, the other one actually that just out of completely left field is on the digital identity space, looked at a company called Entrusted. Would have been good to look at them kind of 2 years ago before we did my health account and everything else, but and have plenty of time when we did that. But they kind of, they're American and they sort of they do that whole, hold up your driver's license and it'll biometrically check that and take the information off it and create you a unique identity. But then they kind of call themselves the only no-code decentralized peer-to-peer ecosystem using blockchain. And then you can basically, if you've got like education, you want to apply for a job at a university, at a whatever in America, you can actually put your blockchain credentials onto your LinkedIn profile, and then the potential employer can view that and see that it was authorized by the credential provider, by the university or by the whatever, or so you can kind of self-manage. So it sounds like companies like IBM are using it to, from bringing employees on, and you have to basically get your, university qualifications onto there, be able to apply for jobs for them. But equally, we could be using it for the, identify someone to that kind of DIA level 3 standard, and then and then have it, and they have their own digital wallet. They kind of have everything. I didn't ask price. I imagine it's not cheap, but
no, probably not. Although what we have isn't cheap either, so it costs money to run identity. Turns out, we've been something to kind of add on to the NHI conversation. It's been quite a conversation around the health system in the last sort of 12-18 months about disability specifically, and so I've kind of got drawn into a conversation today. A bunch of experts have made some questions about whether people have a disability, and so they want to turn those questions into a computer system. It might be a dozen questions about someone's disability, and the first question I asked was, have we talked to anyone with a disability about what these questions are? And the answer was no, we had experts come up with them. The second question I asked was, does a person with a disability get any benefits having filled this out? No, we want the data so that we know who has a disability. And so it's real funny because now I've written a business case and they're asking for money, and I'm kind of the two fundamental things that you might expect to have in order to know whether you're solving the problem. You've done neither of them. You've not talked to anyone that would give us the information, and you've not told me why they would give you the information. So it's been a really interesting conversation today, and it's taken quite a few emails backwards and forwards for them to kind of get to the point where they've gone, oh crap. But I'm glad that we got there before we decided to give them any money.
I've got disability in my NHI capability list.
Yes.
I've got a summary blank, key potential benefits opportunity. I've got assist in identifying vulnerable populations to assist in the delivery of equitable healthcare, which is basically a copy and paste of putting iwi affiliation in the line above.
Yeah. And so what's the problem with iwi affiliation? No one wants to fill it out because they don't know what they get from having filled it out, and they don't trust us and how we might use the data. So do you think there might be a problem with disability? Yeah. And then I threw, and this is the thing that actually tipped them over. Guess what? We've been asking for that when people get COVID because we don't know. So do you have a disability, and do you need any help? And turns out the answers we've been getting aren't reliable, and we don't understand why. So we know that people that we give money to support them for their disability have been saying, no, I don't have a disability. And then we know that a bunch of people, when we go and ring them because they've said they've got a disability, don't actually have one, but they thought they should tick it because they thought they might get something. So turns out the questions that these experts asked are almost exactly like the ones we're already asking, and we already know there's a problem with it. And rather than, take some learnings and do some proper service design, we've kind of just doubled down on it. So it was, I don't know, Justin, if you've had any experience in the disability space in terms of
identifying people that have a disability or not?
Not as a sort of a routine activity that we would sort of incorporate into, for want of a better term, a transaction in the system. My dealings with the disability sector have been in spatial design projects and pulling in sort of working groups to basically take design options and constraints to a group and have them help us problem solve it. But nothing as you were describing. I haven't gone anywhere near that sort of as I say, data capture.
I was going to say, it feels like our MO in 2019 before we had COVID, not what our MO is kind of now, more so. So anyway, oh well. I'm glad I intervened at the time that I did.
Oh, sounds very good.
Because I wanted $1.5 million to do this, to build the computer system, and I'm like, what? You don't even know what the computer system is that you're building. Why don't you just spend, let's say, 50 grand or 100 grand and go and talk to some people with disabilities about, if we were to capture some information about you and your disability, what could we use it for? What would it mean for you? And instantly I can think of heaps of use cases. So if you were to go and talk to the Blind Foundation, we could start sending out letters in large font if we knew people were blind. Do you know what I mean? Or we could send out kind of Braille letters or whatever it happens to be. Like, and start to see easy use cases that come out. None of that's been done. So, it's
the thing you raised.
Yeah. How do we? I mean, you seem to be fortunate that you've managed to become aware of this before it kind of got funded and they were off, in project mode. Like, how do we curb or influence the thinking prior to getting to that stage to make sure that the right checks and balances have been done?
Yeah, so my opinion is we've got this innovation framework that kind of we're working on in terms of proof of concept, proof of value, pilot / scale, or whatever that looks like. And to me, if you'd followed that, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, because it kind of forces you to ask the question, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And then it forces you to summarize that and present that to some people that do innovation or involve someone that does innovation regularly. And it's highly likely they're going to ask dumb questions like I did. Do you know what I mean? So I think if we can get that process written up, get some examples of, this is what we expect, this is what a
good looks like.
Yeah, this is what a lean canvas looks like, and this is what we expect when we talk about proof of value, and this is what a scaling plan looks like, or an implementation plan. Then it feels to me like that would go a long way for a lot of people to go, oh, I should know the answer to this before I start, rather than, or I should be seeking to answer this in order to start, rather than, I'm at scaling and I've not answered any of the questions I should have asked kind of out of the gate. So, but I see a lot of projects in the health system, IT projects, where that's the case. It's, we just need to replace this thing. Why are you replacing a thing? Because we already got this thing. What does the thing do? We don't know. We just need a new one. Do we deliver that service anymore? No. Why are we replacing the thing? It's a tricky situation, because I think sometimes it's easy to, it's hard to worry about all the problems you need to solve all of the time. And so sometimes you're looking for really easy things to just knock the task off the list and go on to the next thing. Unfortunately, sometimes those have flow-on consequences.
Do you want to talk about the conversation we had earlier, Justin? The drones? You had some good thoughts.
Hi, we had a good chat. We talked drones. So to catch the group up, my interest in the potential of drones fell out of a conversation with our service clinical director of pharmacy. We are looking to prepare infusion medications, so chemo or immunotherapy off-site, and currently we prepare them on-site at Grafton. And she mentioned that one of them needs to be one of the particular formulas needs to be used within 90 minutes of preparation. And so I just queried the, I guess, what's the risk of that, 500 grams of fluid not making it within 90 minutes for whatever reason. There's I don't know, an accident on a motorway, or a truck topples over on Auckland Harbour Bridge, and we lose our ability to get that medication into the patient. And was curious. I just sort of, as we were talking, suggested, would a drone be useful as a way of receiving, a time critical drug? And she said that they do this. I think they have this need once a week for this type of drug. So I reached out to Eileen and mentioned it to her, and then reached out to one of our SMOs who works in the emergency department, but is also a helicopter pilot. So he's a emergency response pilot. And I emailed him to say, hey, what do you think about drones? What do you know about them? And he immediately called me and said, hey, really great that you're looking into this.
I've got some at home, or
No, yeah. You kind of expect that, right?
Yeah.
I made earlier. Already using it. You guys are so far behind the eight ball. But no, he said in his role, he's got a role with the Northern Helicopter Trust, I think it is, the medical director. Look, he was talking about drones being useful for planned activity, such as the drug delivery, as I mentioned, but also potentially unplanned. And the example he gave was postpartum hemorrhaging on Great Barrier Island, where it's a home birth. So they need to get kit out there. He also described an example of lifesavers using drones, so they can basically just hover over the water and they can drop a flotation device if somebody's in trouble, which is a pretty neat use case. So anyway, popped a thread on the eHealth forum, and a few people expressed some interest or had done some research on it. And Eileen connected us with Eileen from Greymouth, we think. Was it Greymouth? And
I think it's Greymouth, yeah.
There's a trial that they're trying to get underway in the west coast of the South Island, because their courier frequency it's just not supporting their need to get samples and tests and all the rest of it in a timely fashion. So they want to do something about a more timely courier solution, but also have some resiliency if their roads get washed out. So they're working with Swoop Aero, and Swoop Aero are in conversation with the Civil Aviation Authority, and maybe not making the progress that we would hope. So our suggestion to Eileen and Greymouth, not Eileen and Wellington, was that if it would be helpful, I have a helicopter pilot doctor who could get on the phone to the CAA and talk their language around safety issues. When I spoke to Christini, Dr. Christini, he talked about flight corridors, and that you establish flight corridors that the drones are allowed to move through, and that it's quite sort of an established sort of protocol. Auckland would be particularly difficult because of the number of, I guess, flying vehicles with buildings. We've got major air traffic. Our hospital is an airport. So Auckland might be one of the more complex use cases. But certainly earlier today we were talking to Eileen and Greymouth, basically saying if there's anything we can do to help. So our Eileen in Wellington is going to get in touch with the CAA and just sort of let them know that drones are going to be coming, and we expect to see more requests. So how can we make it easy to engage with a Swoop Aero who has the technology, so it's not so hard? And Eileen, what was the term she used? Contract
washing machine contract. Yeah, contract washing machine cycle.
She was in a contract washing machine cycle, which is basically in a loop.
Particularly with legal.
And can't get the trial going. So they've got the provider. They've got
so is it the contract between her and Swoop Aero? Or is it the fact that Swoop Aero can't deliver because of the CAA, or what?
Both.
There's two parts. So so Eileen's going to reach out to the CAA, and I've said that Christini has offered his help as a helicopter pilot. If a conversation with the CAA from him or with him would be helpful. The legal side, I guess I don't want to engage with another DHB's legal team.
I think it's just that kind of new technology. We don't have anything established. what are the terms that we need to establish to make sure risk is managed appropriately? Or it did make me think that, if we're going to be bringing more technology into the healthcare system, like how do we, particularly in the national office, think about kind of giving a level of comfort across legal teams to go, this is kind of the steps that people need to go through, how they engage their industry partners. What's the kind of some of the heavy lifting we can do at a national level to standardize in the way that we procure IT systems now or procure medical devices, kind of like what does the new technology pointy end look like to help build confidence that people just aren't going off and buying cowboy outfits.
Cowboy outfits, that's a really interesting choice.
And engaging
drones.
in risky behavior.
We're buying cowboy outfits because we're cowboys. I don't know. Is that how it works?
Yes, exactly how it works.
I was going to say, given that all the all the helipads at hospitals are a civil aviation, airport effectively, you just get your coordination service at the hospital to log a flight path from the helipad and see what happens.
That's a great suggestion. I will tell them that's what all they need to do.
We've already set up a dispatch.
We've got a solution for you.
Yeah.
Just tick the box. Yeah.
But anyway, look, it's thank you, Eileen, for making that connection. We've all got lots on, but I'd be really keen to whatever we can do in terms of our network of subject matter experts to support Greymouth, and if they can get their pilot up and running. I don't like using that term when it comes to drones. Pilot, it's awkward. If they can get their trial up and running, then how can we use that as a sort of an impetus or as some urgency to say, hey, they've got it working. It's working really well. How do we scale? What does that look like?
So do we think, Justin, this is a proof of concept or proof of value, or both? Because it could be both. Do you know what I mean? You could be proving that the technology can deliver. Well, we kind of know that, though, don't we?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like our context. Yeah.
It's just like making sure it's going to, as a delivery mechanism where drones are becoming commonplace. Does it add value in the health system? In terms of, certainly it was quite concerning to hear the description from Greymouth around the timing at which samples are turning up and the turnaround time, and then things are getting into after hours, and it's really problematic for them. So it sounded, by the way she was describing it, like there's loads of value for their geographic context. But whether or not Auckland would have the same, I don't know.
I think it's trying to explore some of those edge cases, failure modes, and kind of the issues you'd have to address to scale it. So it's trying to understand what the issues are. You don't necessarily need to solve them, but then I think that proof of value thing is, do all of those issues outweigh the benefits you get from doing it? That to me is kind of what you want to understand out of that proof of value is, did it result in a benefit, and how much of the benefit can you get before you run into these problems of, like you said, Justin, the fact that, Auckland's a massive urban centre with lots of flight plans and airports and buildings and stuff.
Yeah, and our use case might be solved by a motorbike.
Yeah, and it might be that by knowing that Auckland's a no-goer, but knowing that we've got lots of rural places, we decide, hey, so the best way to scale this is to only scale it rurally, and we'll come back once we've got that running at scale rurally. We'll come back and look at the urban environment. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe that's the conscious decision you end up making, because the value makes sense in a rural context, but doesn't in an urban context. To your point, maybe a motorbike's better.
And she was pretty confident that it would be a routine, like the utility they would get out from the drone investment would, pay back. You would get return on investment. It wouldn't be just sitting there only being utilized once a day. So I think that they've given it a lot of thought. She did seem a little way down by, getting excited about doing cool new things and resolving some of her issues, to then just be every turn a roadblock coming up.
Blocked. Yeah,
the washing machine.
A hurdle to get over, which unfortunately, like, is, in the innovation space, that can be some of the
It just makes victory all the
Visible.
sweeter. So by the time you actually succeed, it feels so good to have succeeded, I think, is kind of the key thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's a really nice opportunity. I didn't want to ask now, but when they do start seeing some drones flying and she has that satisfaction, to sit down and do a debrief and just understand what was your journey, like what were the blockers, where were the time lags, where did you feel at your lowest point in terms of being an innovator, so that we can check for our innovation networks functions and capability to make sure that we avoid putting someone else through that washing machine experience.
Totally. So talking about value, funnily enough, I had a good idea. Well, I thought it was a good idea, as you do. Might have turned out to be a terrible idea. And I had a chat with Richard Perry the other week, and we think it's a good idea. Which is, I said to him, can we take some videos of everyday things that happen in a hospital? So, a video of an orderly taking a person to radiology, or a video of a ward round, or a video of a medication round, or a video of a physio interacting with the patient, or something like that. And I think the benefit's twofold. So the first benefit is helping people that work in the health system, say, in data and digital, or maybe people like you, Richard, or Lillian. This is what a ward round looks like. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you've never seen a ward round before, this is what a ward round looks like. It happens every day. Every patient gets seen by this group of people, and you can actually watch a video and see it happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not a story I have to tell you. Second benefit, I thought, was that you could then start to measure how long these things take. Do you know what I mean? So your statistical process control, Justin Kennedy Good, would be super interested in, if you had this video, you start to approximate, kind of time and motion studies. Do you know what I mean? So you've got a sample size n equals 1, but at least you then, from watching it, have an estimate of how long something might take, and then you've got a benchmark to go, does your thing take longer than this or shorter than this, or how long do each of these segments of this thing take? We got kind of halfway through the conversation, and Richard went, oh, we're kind of doing that already. And I went, oh, what do you mean? He said, in our medication room, they're doing a study at the moment where they put GoPros up on the walls, high up on the walls, to watch the nurses and how they go through the process of doing the medication rounds. And so I said, yeah, like, can we not do a few more of those? Because, to be honest, I've been having a look at some of the stuff that we're doing. Everyone wants to do work on e-meds in hospitals. I'm like, well, you need to start with what the process looks like at the moment. So you've got a good understanding of what has to happen in order to then re-engineer the process. Does that make sense? And so it feels to me like that feels like a good idea. And that question of where could we create a repository? Could we then create a template for how you do the videos? What do they have to have in them? How long, what area, what do they have to cover? How do you do the consent thing for the patients or the staff that appear in the video? Where do you store it? All of those sort of things. So we thought that was quite a good idea. So we're going to set up a longer conversation, a couple of hours probably, just to work through what we think that might look like. Do you do that, Justin, at the moment? Do you take videos of processes so you can analyze them, or no? Are you kind of more of a time and motion form guy?
Yeah, time and motion form approach. We did explore the technology that's used in coaching sports, where they film, say, for example, a rugby match is being filmed and the scrum keeps collapsing at a certain point.
Yeah.
Observers watching the game with this technology can codify what's going on during the game, and then they can use it sort of immediately after the game to feedback to the hooker. You did this 3 times. This caused the scrum to collapse. So the feedback is really timely. And we explored, the software was called iCoder. We were quite keen to put that in the operating theatres as a coaching tool.
Yeah.
But it didn't really progress. Otherwise, yeah, it is paper-based. We'd love to get to a point where our time and motion studies have a lot more richness to them, and it's easier to capture the data, because it's just a hygiene thing, just to check every 6 months. Are our processes performing as we would expect, or to baseline? And the effort to observe them, to check, it's quite onerous, putting a nurse.
Massively onerous. Yeah.
If you had ways that you could actually just get maybe a slightly less rich view, but just a time and motion where there was some observation and you could identify quite quickly, hey, something's changed for the better or for the worse. It would be really valuable. I'm not sure about the immersion component. We've not talked about having video footage such that it's a repository for people who don't work in the hospital to actually start to understand the hospital.
Because it's a funny thing, because and this may be a problem for us just in the national office. We get a bunch of people that kind of think they're working, so work in our building and think they're working in the health system, and you know, they may never have been to a hospital. And so I have a lot of conversations with people about what it's actually like in a hospital, and I think I probably have that conversation with researchers as well on a regular basis, because I often haven't been in a hospital before.
I would wonder, John, about because this is
Do you
something
think just watch Shortland Street? Just watch Shortland Street.
No.
Yeah.
I wanted to create an immersion experience for new members of the executive leadership team, and say, we want to give you a day in the life of what it's like to be an inpatient in this ward, and the staff will not know that you're part of the ELT. You will be treated just like everybody else. And because I've heard from architecture practices that the architects who are drawing up the room designs, you know, they're 25 years old. They've never even been sick.
Totally.
And here they are designing these environments that some 90-year-old is going to have to live in for a week. So an immersion experience that we could create would be massively valuable. But how you do it, maybe it's like filming.
So literally, we had half-hour conversation to start the conversation, but I think it could add a lot of value. Eileen, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say ACC did a program a few years ago where it was primarily for people who build houses, but they had a suit that you wore and gloves and eyesight, so to mimic what it's like for older adults. So restricted your movement and your fine motor skills in your eyesight. And then got them to go and get like a spoon out of the drawer or fill the jug up from the kettle to kind of go like, you're building these environments and this is how you've designed it to kind of like, if that's how I'm able to move it, that's how it's kind of like impacts it. I'll have to dig into, because I went down and tried on the suit and it was like, even going up steps was really challenging.
Prior to COVID, we had a pretty good rhythm of certainly in our performance improvement teams being able to just make clinical environments available through our relationships, because clinicians constantly have trainee physios and nurses and junior doctors. It's like they're so accustomed to bringing in
randos
people, basically into new environments, that we had quite a nice rhythm. And my team at the moment are quite keen to actually make that much more valuable by creating like a designers in residency program, so that they can actually spend deep time understanding an environment, exposing like workarounds that people have got workarounds, and actually generating opportunities for improvement. So there might be an in residency type approach too that could but anyway, I think there's definite value in the conversation, John. I think making sure people have an empathy and a respect for the work is really important. But just having it done in such a way that it doesn't create a burden, and you're not. I mean, I remember standing in a neurosurgical procedure that went for 12 hours, and I stayed for 6. And I got to a point where I was just like, actually, I just feel there's something that doesn't feel morally right while this person's having their brain operated on, for me to be in here as a fly on the wall. I mean, fascinating for me, but there was something that didn't feel right about my presence, because I certainly wasn't adding any value. So anyway, so getting it right, getting the balance right, the purpose right.
Totally. I 100% think that it's not, it's not just on a ward, but it might be lots of different aspects of how a hospital operates, because you kind of, lots of people come up with ideas, and it might be an outside-in idea. Do you know what I mean? And you've kind of got this question of, how can we most efficiently validate the utility of that, and do we have to, or could if you had some of this stuff, could the person validate it themselves? I've got this idea that we would have, we would get rid of ward rounds, on the basis of not knowing what a ward round was. Do you know, like, it's that sort of kind of, we could get rid of that idea because just go and watch this video. This is what a ward round like, and this is what happens in a ward round. So to me, I think there's possibly some of that kind of discovery kind of piece that you can avoid, as well as, to your point, that routine, regular kind of
update of this is what good practice looks like. Now, I tell you what would be fascinating would be to film the same process in every hospital in this country.
I was about to say the problem with recording it in one hospital is I did the same. I went into ED in Christchurch and went into ED in Nelson, and not ED, theatre. Went into both of them. They didn't choose me 12-hour surgeries, though. They chose me pretty quick minor procedures that were kind of done and dusted in 20 minutes. But I did a visit through both of those, and the process differences and how they set up and how they, like Nelson's got a, what do you call it, a clean corridor and a dirty corridor, and everything goes through in one direction. Whereas Christchurch, I don't know, it might be different now with the new building, but then it was like, everything was stuck into stainless steel, containers and kind of crashing into each other, clean and dirty stuff, because they were having to fight their way down the same corridor, and completely different. And the whole scheduling, the utilisation and optimisation for one was all around, we don't have enough theatres and we don't have enough surgeons, so we've got to do absolutely everything. And the other was, we've got tons of theatres and tons of surgeons, but we've got a huge number of acutes coming in the door every 5 seconds that reprioritise. So the whole prioritisation processes were complete polar opposites,
So so that was my somewhat good idea, I think, was how do we gather that up?
There might be another bit of value from it, John, and that is just enabling the public to understand how hospitals work. What does an anaesthetist do? What does a surgeon do? What does a nurse do? What's the typical day of the orderly? That we maybe take for granted that people understand all these various roles in quite a complicated system, and having a way to just interact with it to understand the distinctions and why they're distinct, and the roles that they play, and which questions you ask of what type of function. I just wonder if there's a sort of an education piece as well.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a really interesting point. I kind of then go, we talked a little bit a long time ago about Eileen and I and Mary about VR and there's so they do a Chinese kind of capability program for NZTE, and so we saw some of that, and they do like a VR kind of pick a path. So you get invited. You go to China. You get invited to a lunch with the person that's going to be manufacturing your product or whatever. Where do you sit at the table? You're given some food that you don't want to eat. Do you eat the food? When do you talk about business? And it's literally this kind of educational thing, which is actually like those books, those pick a path books. Yeah. And it feels to me like some of that, what you were just describing, it was like you could almost make a game out of some of that stuff, which is, oh, you forgot to put the orderly in, so no one's going to radiology, or it's that sort of kind of there's no oxygen on the ward anymore. It's like that sort of kind of education, but kind of making it a bit more fun than it is probably for patients at the moment. You can imagine. I just imagine like having that game and being a patient on a ward, and somehow having that connected to the hospital operations dashboard. Like, this person's a good patient because they've done all of their training about how we do all of our jobs, so they'll be like super efficient.
Did you play Theme Hospital when you were a kid, John?
No, I didn't. Is that a thing?
Is it? It was the most amazing game. It came out maybe a year after Theme Park, and they thought, like, they're really scraping the barrel of the early 3D computer game graphics. Everybody came in and they'd been licking the lid off yogurt pots and so on, so their head had swollen up, and it was a great game. But absolutely, this conversation takes me back to that. And maybe kind of, I guess, heading into the kind of stuff we've been doing around digital twins and thinking about actually creating that replica, the simulation of real world processes in digital form, and there's heaps of potential in all those areas. And I guess the same with the conversation we just had around drones. Again, if we can get the drones to understand the real world and not crash and satisfy the CAA, then there's heaps of opportunities. And simply being able to understand how we as an organisation function day to day, week to week, where the courier comes from, kind of heard for the first time last week, there's a courier who drives every day from Palmerston North with a sample and then turns around and goes home again. Kind of great example there of if we can start to bring in things like drones. But having systems that understand that big picture, and so that we can drill in and start to identify where are there some quick wins and where are the gnarly problems that we can solve long term. But yeah, Theme Hospital, highly recommended. Haven't played that for 20 odd years, but maybe it was more influential.
We should be bringing it back.
Choice than I think. So maybe I should look back at it and see if it's ended up with where I am today.
Maybe we should just bring it back, Richard. You know, so they have the patient entertainment screens in some of the newer hospitals now in New Zealand. Maybe we should give that as a free-to-play game for people. And then we hire the people that we have a leaderboard for all of the patients, and then the people that score the highest we offer jobs to.
I was going to say there's some good game developers here in Wellington.
Yeah.
And I think Netflix did something similar to a movie that they film different scenarios, and along the movie you keep watching it, and you have to choose what you do. And I think that would be quite cool. Imagine you have a collaboration with Shortland Street and make it your choice to go through different scenario or something like that. Like make it entertained. Maybe people will like it.
Yeah, I've been surprised that the entertainment and call bell systems haven't got closer together. Because it strikes me that one of the things that we know about driving a better experience in any kind of environment like a hospital is a sense of autonomy and control. Yeah. So in planes you can adjust the light or the airflow or whatever, but they have quite a controlled system for when the lights are on and they're off, and when you get your food and when you don't. But in a hospital bed, the orderly turns up to take you to radiology before the physio's turned up to assess you to move, or before you need and you need to go to the bathroom. We just the ability to be able to plan your day around. I'm going to go. I'm going to have a shower. I'm going to use the bathroom. I'm going to eat my lunch. I'm going to have visitors, and then I'm going to go to radiology. So
I'm aware of some projects around the country, Justin, where in certain buildings in our hospitals the call bell system's broken. And I'm like, ooh, I wonder if that gives us an opportunity to rethink some of the. And so my point before about won't worry about this problem. We'll just replace the call bells with what we've always had. Do you know what I mean? It's
100%. That is such a good the framing being what is the patient itinerary? Using an airline a long haul analogy. So the 17-hour flight to New York, provided it gets all the way. What would that look like if you compared it to an overnight stay in a short stay unit? The airline version is going to be so good and slick and planned, and the hospital one's going to be chaos. People turning up at the wrong time, and then the physio's time's wasted, and the orderly's time's wasted.
I'll come back in 15 minutes. Honestly, I remember as a physio, I did that so often. The person isn't here. Where are they? Oh, they're down at radiology.
And then the patient plan drives all the scheduling for all the support functions. And it could all be automated. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox because it's a really good opportunity. I can't believe it still hasn't happened. But anyway, so if you want to do it, John, I'm keen.
Sounds good. I'll add it to the list of things.
all the things.
Very good. Okay, well, that's our time. We will see you again in a couple of weeks. And now it disappears talking with you guys, so it's good.
I feel like I'm living the dream now. I realise I'm just playing out Theme Hospital 20 years on, and realise there's an open source version. So that's me sorted for tonight.
You have to send me the link. You're gonna have to send me the link.
And it's 75% off.
Yeah, that's outstanding.
The first link looks the first link you shared, Richard, was it? I think that's probably the better one because that's like a redeveloped version.
Yeah,
the one I shared looks like it's the 1997 version or something. Yeah.
The OG. Yeah, nice.
Amazing stuff.
Very good.
One quick question, John.
Yes.
Do you guys work with food industry on stuff? Because one of the things we've been doing with wastewater is getting capsicum virus, pepper marmottle virus numbers. And we've got a couple of people looking out feelers at the moment around pepper consumption, got capsicums. So basically, whenever anyone eats a pepper or some products like pizza sauce or anything that contains pepper, you poo out this pepper virus stuff, and then we use it as one potential source to normalise wastewater numbers for COVID.
Huh.
But we're not sure about how seasonal pepper consumption is within New Zealand. So
I'd suggest it's probably quite seasonal.
Yeah.
The interesting observation I'd make is we haven't done a lot, but certainly, obviously, the food you eat influences your health over the longer term. So I think definitely there's a really interesting question about what you could measure, what you do measure, and how that might help. Because I think there's probably a sensitivity kind of question as well, because your sampling network's relatively still quite coarse at the moment, isn't it? So it's sort of Wellington might have what, 4 or 5 sampling points. Is that sort of where you're at the moment, or?
Yeah, so probably Wellington in terms of the big urban centres, then we've got the big 4, plus then up to Carpety, Paraparauga, over to Featherston and Masterton and all those smaller sites.
But how refined are the sampling? Like, how many samples do you do per city at any given time?
We're doing 3 per week from big sites in Wellington.
Yeah, no. How many sites do you have? Was the question. How many sites do you have in Wellington?
Less than 10, 8.
8 or 10.
Yeah, probably around about. I'd say between all the ones over in the Wairarapa, probably about 9 or 10.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, we don't want to go further upstream at this point. We're just trying to get the best out of the
Well, I was just thinking. I was thinking about kind of the, you've got this trade-off between detection and targeting, don't you? Do you know what I mean? So, and I was wondering about in terms of targeting, can you target population health at the level that you're describing from a food perspective? All the people in this suburb eat too much KFC or something. I don't know what it is.
We're not going there.
Well, maybe not. But then it's that sort of idea that leads you onto what could you do with food? And I think there might well be food allergen kind of questions that we could start to explore, or because you guys have done some Campylobacter stuff as well. Like, could you then target medical officer of health visits to places where you get higher Campylobacter readings, like, so where all of the organizations are that sell food, sell chicken or whatever, KFC, and if the Campylobacter in Miramar is way higher than anywhere else in town, you might go, why is that? And should we be going and doing food safety kind of reviews of those businesses selling chicken in Miramar? It's that sort of kind of, there are some links there, I think.
Or some more use cases.
Yeah.
We've kind of, certainly the last couple of years, the wastewater epidemiology has just come on so far and so fast. I saw a great presentation earlier in the week from Canada on some of the stuff they're doing. And again, it's kind of mind-blowing for us just how far and that's going, but certainly looking into things beyond just infectious disease and drugs into dietary factors is definitely there. And like what we did in Christchurch, what we've done in Auckland, going up the stream from the wastewater treatment plant to the pump stations.
Yeah, so I remember reading in London they knew the level of contraceptives in the water because it passed through. Did they find was it the level of cocaine they had? It was drugs, or maybe I thought there was something around estrogen or something they could measure in wastewater in London. Yeah, so you kind of got it.
Contraceptives sound doable. I think things like antidepressants. There's some stuff like there's loads of depressed fish in the States in some of the Great Lakes who are just not breeding anymore because they're too sad because of all the antidepressants and stuff. So there's heaps of that kind of environmental side as well.
Yeah.
But no, I just wondered if you had some context into food industry. I remember when we did the Sugar Smart app in Public Health England, we were able to pull out how much sugar was in each box with a barcode on the supermarket shelf, and that was quite
So we do have some of those things, 100%. Maybe we should pick this up as a separate conversation because I realise we're kind of running over time. So I'll send you an email because yes, there are some things we know about and some things we do. So yeah. Okay, cool. Right.
Right.
Well,
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, guys.
everyone.
We'll
Thanks,
see you next time.
Everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.